Alright guys, so I'll just show you kung paano ko sabihin ito, but you can actually do your own style. But let me just set an example, okay? So let me start with my part, moderator. Okay, good morning everyone. Today we're discussing a critical topic that affects not just the future of the Philippines, but the entire world. Climate change and youth activism. We will explore the role of young people in addressing climate change, the strategies they are using, the challenges they face, and the impact of youth led movements in the Philippines. Let me first introduce our panelists. Okay, so we have Angelica. She will talk about the role of youth in addressing climate change. Liza will discuss the different strategies that youth activists employ. Julie will highlight the challenges youth face in this movement. Kelvin will speak on the impact of youth led movements. Micah will present some case studies of successful youth activism, and Dailin will conclude with call to action. So let's start with Angelica. Thank you, Mark. The role of young people in addressing climate change is crucial, especially in a country like the Philippines, where we're among the most vulnerable to its impacts. First, youth play a significant role in raising awareness. Many young Filipinos are using social media platforms to educate their peers about the dangers of the climate change and its importance of sustainable practices. Through viral campaigns and local initiatives, they are helping spread critical information. Second, young Filipinos are actively participating in political engagement. We've seen youth representatives in local governments advocating for better climate policies. Youth are also mobilizing voters to support candidates who prioritize environmental issues. Lastly, youth are forming grassroots movements. What is this? For example, organizations like Youth for Climate Hope have been pivotal in leading climate strikes and lobbying for policy changes. They are the voice for younger generation, pushing for immediate action. Thank you, Angelica. It's clear that the youth are the forefront of climate activism. Now let's hear from Liza on strategies that youth activists are using. Thanks, Mark. When it comes to strategies, young people in the Philippines have been innovative in their approach to climate activism. First, social media is a key tool. Many youth activists are turning to platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to organize awareness campaigns. For instance, during Typhoon Yolanda, we saw a rise in an online advocacy with hashtags like hashtag Youth for Climate and calls for donations and aid. Second, we've seen youth organizing climate strikes. Inspired by global movements like Fridays for the Future, Filipinos youth have staged climate strikes in cities like Manila and Cebu. So these strikes demand accountability from our government to address climate change more aggressively. Additionally, community projects are a big part of these strategies. Young people are initiating activities like tree planting, beach cleanups, and urban gardening. These practical actions help reduce carbon footprints and engage local communities directly. Through these strategies, the youth have made themselves seen and heard, and they are pushing for urgent change that we all need. That's amazing to hear, especially of how young people are harnessing technology and taking action on the ground. But every movement faces challenges. Julie, could you share with us what challenges of youth activists encounter in their fight against climate change? Of course, and there are definitely many challenges. One of the biggest hurdles is the lack of representation in decision making. Many young people feel like their voices aren't being taken seriously. They participate in dialogues and propose ideas, but often older generations control their policies or the policies and the funding. There's also pushback from authorities. We've seen instances like, where youth activists are discouraged or even threatened for their actions, especially when the protests and campaigns go against the interests of big corporations or certain political figures. Then there's the issue of limited resources. Most youth led organizations operate in small budgets and rely on donations or volunteer work, which they can only go so far. Without sufficient funding, it's hard to sustain campaigns or implement long term projects. Lastly, many young activists deal with mental health struggles like eco anxiety and burnout. The pressure of fighting global crisis combined with resistance can lead to stress and sense of helplessness. Thank you for highlighting these important challenges, Julie. Despite these barriers, we've seen youth led movements make a real impact. Kelvin, could you tell us about the results of these movements? Absolutely. Despite the challenges, youth led movements in the Philippines have made significant contribution to addressing climate change. One major impact is on policy changes. For example, local ordinances banning single use plastics in cities like Quezon City came after advocacy from youth groups. At the national level, young people have actively participated in climate dialogues, pushing for stricter environmental regulations. Another key impact is raising global awareness. Filipino youth have made their voices heard on international platforms, such as the UN Climate Change Conference. They are sharing stories on how climate change is affecting our country and it has drawn international attention and support. Lastly, these movements have built community solidarity. Young people aren't working alone. They're collaborating with older generations, local governments, and international organizations. And this multi generational approach strengthens the movement and increases its impact. It's clear that the youth aren't just raising their voices, they are creating real change. Thank you, Kelvin. It is inspiring to hear that youth led movements have influenced policies and raised awareness both locally and globally. Now, Micah, could you share some examples of successful youth movements in the Philippines? Sure. One standout example is the youth group Youth for Climate Hope, which has been instrumental in organizing climate strikes in the Philippines. They work with other organizations to push for climate justice and have successfully raised awareness among thousands of young Filipinos. Another example is Sustainable Cities, a youth organization that promotes sustainable urban living. They run workshops or they run workshops on recycling, reducing waste, and public transportations more effectively. Now, their initiatives have been made a tangible difference in communities, especially in the cities like Davao and Cebu. In local communities, there have been grassroots efforts, such as community led beach cleanups. For example, in Palawan, youth volunteers organize cleanups that not only help the environment but also raised awareness about marine conservation. So these case studies show that youth activism isn't just about large scale protests. It is also about everyday actions that lead to meaningful and sustainable change. Thank you, Micah, for these inspiring examples. It's evident that youth activism takes many forms, from local cleanups to national advocacy. As we wrap up, Dylan, what final thoughts or calls to actions you can share? Thank you, Mark. My final message is simple. Climate change climate change affects us all, but the youth are uniquely positioned to lead the fight. We need everyone in this room to get involved, whether it's participating in local cleanup, spreading awareness online, or voting the leaders who prioritize the environment. Everyone has a role to play. We must also support one another. Young activists need encouragement and collaboration from all sectors, government, business, and civil society. Let's make sure we use our voices, resources, and networks to drive real change. Remember, the future is in our hands, and the actions we make today will determine what kind of world we leave behind for the next generation. Thank you, Dalen, and thank you for all our panelists. It's clear that the youth are not just leaders of tomorrow, but the leaders of today. They are taking action and making difference in the fight against climate change. Let's all do our part. Support youth activism and work together to create a sustainable future for the Philippines and the world. Thank you.